Hello, class. This is our team project. We are Team 9. My name is Joseph Moran.
My name is Brianna Deschamps.
I'm Anthony Orlano.
And I'm Jasmine Stewart.
So for our project, we decided to interview a professional. Her name is Dr. Nancy Geist-Giacomini. Nancy is a mediation manager for the Eviction Diversion Program with the City of Philadelphia. This program started 4 years ago during the start of COVID. It was designed as a way to keep the eviction process in Philadelphia up and running and streamlined during COVID lockdowns when everyone was working from home and meeting in person was just impossible. Nancy has extensive experience in conflict management. For the past 25 plus years, she began her career in conflict resolution here at UD, actually, as the assistant dean of students, working with student conduct. And listed, we have a link to her eviction diversion page and her LinkedIn.
So one of the first questions that we asked her was, have you ever had to deal with an angry tenant or landlord?
Have you ever had to deal with a tenant or a landlord who was angry or aggressive because they didn't get the type of deal that they wanted to?
Yeah, we see a lot of different things, and again, the housing counselor piece, I think, really helps because not that they can't be passionate themselves, our housing counselors, but they're talking with and meeting with tenants ahead of time. They're coming into a mediated space, not without emotion and passion, but knowing that it has to stay what I call right-sized enough to be heard and to build agreement. Because if anybody, tenant, housing counselor, mediator, if anybody comes into that space and is triggered because of everything that is going on, that they can't negotiate in good faith, well, then we've lost that opportunity. So often, surprisingly often, folks are pretty, what I call level and engaged and collaborative, even if the stuff they're dealing with is tough. And it's very different if it's a landlord who's coming to call to mediate, or whether it's a paid attorney agent who's got hundreds of these cases and zero relationship with the person they're on the phone with. The dynamics there are very different, but typically folks participate. Every once in a while, we get complaints or concerns after the fact. And we often typically have a way to double back and say, no, if the mediator said a thing that made you feel they weren't impartial, if the housing officer, a housing counselor got too zealous and gave you the perception, or it was really the case that somebody couldn't get a word in edgewise, we would pause even an agreement that came out of that, check with all parties, and we can always offer a second mediation with a different counselor or a different mediator. So those are typically the things you would see. We try very hard to get it right. We try very hard to not have folks get into an agreement together and right, we 50% of the agreement, only to have it fall apart, or worse to say, well, that I felt intimidated that I had to do that. That's not what we're after. We really want to put a piece of paper in people's hands where they feel heard and they like the terms, period, or they like the terms better than what would have happened before, and it works out, and folks either stay together and make the thing work, they gracefully exit one another, and that's the end of it. So I am, to your good question. It's unusual, but we see it, every couple of sessions, we'll see that kind of passion that you're talking about. But mostly folks take advantage of the space. If they really want to be there and work something out, they're going to take advantage of that space and try to get something down that's going to work for them.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So as you just saw, though it's not common, as a mediator, she's able to handle emotions management very well so that her landlords and tenants' concerns are thought so that everyone can end up with a deal and are happy with the negotiation.
The next topic we go over are receptiveness, and in this next clip, it goes over receptiveness and negotiations and mediations in Nancy's field of tenant and landlord cases.
How receptive are you to opposing viewpoints when you're mediating? Say, the landlord versus the tenant, how open are you to their emotions and their personal feelings about it? And at what point do you have to be like, I'm here to do my job and be impartial and all of that?
Well, of course, you're always there to facilitate the role and to be impartial. And so across any, mediation program that I'd be part of, the deep foundations, and we publish and teach on this in the way we do mediation, is you really have to understand not just the process and the steps, and then yes, I can come in here and be impartial, but I, and every mediator needs to come in knowing what it means to really be multi-partial, what it means to show up with this identity, with clients that are predominantly of color in the city of Philadelphia. It matters. It matters. Doesn't mean I can't be well received or heard. It can't mean that I can't be multi-partial, but it's different. You have to have a level of understanding about what you're bringing to the space. And when you say you're multi-partial, how to be trustworthy when you're meeting folks in the middle of conflict that don't share your identity or don't share the same experiences that their mediator does. In different settings, were we not to have the volume that we have, if we could set it up differently, lots of programs would create a co-mediated space where they could better account for depth and identity and experiences. They could better tailor mediator to clients. That's not the space we're looking in here. But I think fundamentally back to your question, skill sets include understanding that there, the difference in power imbalances, the importance of social justice, and tending to everybody across identities. And we are not blank slates when we walk into the space. You have to know a whole lot about being sensitive to all of that. And we have to be willing, I think this was with your question, if we're ever called on that, if somebody in the space were to say, wow, I really feel like you're leaning agent over here, I don't feel heard at all. And part of that dynamic could be identity and some of the things going on. As a mediator, you have to be non-judgmental and non-defensive enough to say, oh, thank you, that matters. Let's check this out. Let's talk this privately. Let's make space to pause. Let's make space to reschedule and bring in somebody else. If all of that, I think, fits with the kind of a question that you're asking.
So from this clip, you can see as a mediator, she has to be non-judgmental and impartial and also focus on the task at hand, but take into account how everyone is feeling to try and get the best outcome for both parties involved.
How receptive. And the next and final topic we'll be discussing in this presentation is a very important one in mediation. It's the role of power. So within the eviction diversion program, the power imbalance between tenant and landlords are viewed in this clip. So let's take a look. How do you see, an outsider might think that the landlord always has more power in the negotiation than the tenant, but I was kind of wondering, in your experience, how do you see that the role of power playing out in these situations?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's present in most conflicts, right? You always have to tend to pay attention to power and how folks are experiencing power. You might not think there is coming into a situation that seems balanced, but to the parties involved, there may always be, there's somebody who thinks they've got one, right up on me or whatever. In this space, right, we already said, there is a natural power imbalance in an eventual relationship. Somebody owns a house or managing a house and somebody else is beholden to them and has to pay. But it's interesting because across partners and definitely tenants, I have to imagine, would say that the landlord holds the power. I'm among a few people in the program that talks one-on-one with landlords and seems to a liaison role, and I can tell you, they think the tenants hold the power. And so it's very, very fascinating. And it's not for me to judge. I'm not in either of their spaces, but I do understand because, especially again, the small landlords, not the legal folks that are making a buck taking people to court. It's a kind of different dynamic. But if you're a landlord, you're not all that savvy, like you've already kind of covered, but you're a business holder and you have to know what you're doing. They watched this program grow up through COVID. They watched the resources that got invested into supporting the tenants so they can keep their roof over people's heads. And it definitely, the city efforts definitely did mean tenant heavy because that was the priority, right? If you're being landlord heavy, you're going to have people out then the street. But the landlords have a stake in this too. The landlords are hurt and harmed too, because if the tenant's not paying them for all the reasons, well, they're not paying somebody or they're not getting the income that they counted on. So I have seen over these years, and I think the landlords are doing this a little bit, feel a little less left to the sidelines. Even though there's a power imbalance built into a relationship, they at least now see the resources the city's put into there's an online website above and beyond what I do. There's a meeting, somebody can actually call a person and get on the phone, which happened a year and a half ago. And that I think for my money, being a process advocate and trying very hard to have that realistic multi-partiality and really care about that. I don't want our landlords to feel like they're the odd person out or gonna get the short end of the thing. I want them to come in and kind of fundamentally believe this might work and to find that to be true, to be treated with a level of respect that allows them to say a thing and the tenant to say a thing, and maybe we could actually hear each other differently and work towards an agreement. Tenants have had that support for a while for all the reasons that we talked about. So I like the place we've gotten to.
Yeah, so as you can see in this clip, Nancy really delves into the complexity of this topic and talking about the power imbalance between that relationship of tenants and landlords. There are a lot of different things to consider, such as the experience of the landlord, whether they're a corporate landlord or someone new to the game, and the certain tenants and the kind of rights that they have and some of the benefits that they got, especially over COVID. So it's a really interesting and diverse topic that kind of explains how important power really is in mediations in this field. How do you see?
Okay, so our key takeaways from this team project is that mediation is a very important occupation in the world of professional conflict resolution. Tenant versus landlord eviction is a very relatable subject to every student in this room, just given the fact that all the negotiations that we have done throughout this course. Nancy is able to take what she has learned from her experience and apply it to her everyday life. The topics we have discussed in class are all very relevant to the mediation process, and conflict resolution is very complex and requires a calm hand that navigates multiple skills. So basically, mediation is vital for resolving conflicts like landlord-tenant issues. Nancy uses all of her experience to handle everyday situations, and the topic in class directly relate to the complex skill set required for successful conflict resolution.